poor little girl only had $5 to buy a birthday cake for her mom, until a lonely CEO walked in, and it was a cold November evening in New York City, the kind that turned sidewalks into frosty mirrors and sent people rushing home with their collars up. The streets buzzed with sirens and honking cabs, but inside a small corner bakery on 47th Street, it was quiet. The bell above the door chimed softly as a little girl stepped in. She was no taller than the counter, her cheeks flushed from the wind. Her brown hair curled slightly at the ends and was tied into two ponytails. She wore a faded pink baby doll dress, the hem frayed, and scuffed shoes with soles barely holding together. Her name was Sophia, 6 years old. She walked slowly toward the counter, her wide brown eyes scanning the display of cakes behind the glass. Most were large, elaborate, clearly out of reach. In her hand, she held a crumpled $5 bill. It was all she had. Today was her mother's birthday. She stood on tiptoe and placed the bill on the counter with both hands. Her voice came out quiet but hopeful. "Hi, I'd like to buy a birthday cake for my mom. This is all I have." The bakery worker, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes, looked at the money, then at the girl. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," she said gently. "The smallest cake we have is $15. I wish I could help." Sophia looked down, hands gripping the edge of the counter. Her lips quivered, but she blinked fast, willing back tears. Then she looked up again and offered a tiny smile. "That's okay. Maybe I can just get a candle instead?" Before the woman could answer, the bell above the door rang again. A tall man in a black suit entered, brushing snow off his coat. Everything about him, the sharp suit, the expensive shoes, the Rolex, marked him as someone important. His hair was neatly styled, but his eyes looked tired. Not from work, but from years of something deeper. Ryan Carter. The woman behind the counter recognized him immediately. CEO of a major tech firm, wealthy, brilliant, alone. He started toward the counter, but paused when he heard Sophia's small voice. "I don't need frosting," the girl said. "I can sing to her instead." Ryan's expression changed. He watched for a moment, then stepped forward. Turning to the cashier, he spoke calmly. "I'll take the biggest cake you have. Please wrap it beautifully." Sophia turned, confused. "But I only have $5, she said, holding up the bill with both hands. Ryan knelt beside her, gently brushing a curl from her face. His voice was warm and steady. "Your $5 already paid for this cake," he said, "because the love you have for your mom is worth more than anything in this store." The bakery fell silent. The cashier blinked back tears. A man by the window slowly set down his coffee. No one spoke. Ryan stood again. "Please write this on the cake," he said to the baker. "Happy birthday to the most wonderful mom in the world." Sophia held the cake box carefully, her face lit with joy. She turned to Ryan. "Mr. I don't know your name, but I'll tell my mom about you tonight." Ryan smiled, softly, genuinely. "My name is Ryan, and don't forget to stay warm, little princess." She nodded and stepped back into the cold, the cake in her arms. Snowflakes danced around her as the door closed behind her. Inside the bakery, the warmth she left behind lingered, like a candle someone had lit in the middle of winter. The wind outside had grown sharper, biting at cheeks and fingertips as the sky darkened by the minute. Streetlights flickered on, casting a soft yellow hue over cracked pavement. Ryan stood at the bakery door, watching the little girl in the pink dress clutch the cake box to her chest. "Thank you, Mr. Ryan," Sophia called cheerfully, her smile wide despite the cold. She stepped out onto the icy sidewalk, her tiny shoes barely holding together. Her thin dress fluttered in the breeze. Ryan frowned. The chill made him instinctively pull his coat tighter, but she had only a light sweater. She shivered. He took a step toward her. "Where do you live, Sophia?" She looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Just a few blocks. I walk home all the time." He crouched down, his voice gentle. "Can I take you? It's too cold for walking." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." The contrast between the girl and the luxury car was stark. Sophia sat in the leather seat of Ryan's sleek black sedan, legs swinging above the floor. She held the cake close, gazing out at the glowing city. "My mom works all day," she said unprompted. "She's a housekeeper at a hotel. She's really pretty and smells like soap and lavender. At night, she tucks me in and sings this silly song. But I like it." Ryan gripped the steering wheel, listening. "She says she doesn't need gifts, just me," Sophia continued. "But I wanted her to have something special this year. I wanted her to feel loved." His chest tightened. He could not remember the last time someone had done something selfless for him, or when he had done something that truly mattered. They turned down a narrow street. Buildings leaned too close together, paint peeling from the bricks. He parked in front of a worn-down apartment building with a rusted stairwell and dimly lit windows. Sophia hopped out. "This way," she said, leading him up 3 flights of creaky stairs, still holding the cake. At the door, she grinned. "Mama, open up. I have a surprise." After a pause, the lock clicked. The door opened, revealing a woman in a faded gray hotel uniform. Her long blonde hair was tied back loosely, and her face, though tired, was quietly beautiful, shaped by resilience. Her eyes landed on Sophia, then shifted to the tall man beside her. She stepped forward, cautious. "I'm Ryan," he said softly. "I met your daughter at the bakery. She's really special." Emily studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. "Thank you. I wasn't expecting company." She stepped aside, opening the door. Inside, the apartment was small and worn, but clean. The wallpaper peeled in places. The furniture was second-hand, but neatly kept. It smelled like fabric softener and something warm. A tiny table stood in the corner, set for one. "Please, come in," Emily said. Ryan stepped in, taking in the space. A curtain separated the bedroom. The kitchenette was spotless. It was a home built from effort and love. Sophia placed the cake on the table like a treasure. "Happy birthday, Mommy," she whispered, climbing onto a chair. "I bought it myself, but Mr. Ryan helped." Emily stared at the cake. Frosted letters read, "Happy birthday to the most wonderful mom in the world." Tears welled in her eyes. She placed a hand over her mouth. "Sweetheart." Ryan remained silent, moved by the love between them. "Make a wish, Mommy," Sophia said. "Then we blow the candles." Emily closed her eyes. "I wish," she said softly, "that my little girl will always be surrounded by good people who love her." Ryan felt a sharp pull in his chest. The words echoed deep, where he had kept things hidden for too long. Dinner was simple, noodles and boiled vegetables. But to Ryan, it was the most meaningful meal he had shared in years. Before leaving, he noticed Sophia's coat by the door. Thin, worn, far too light for the season. Quietly, he pulled a new wool scarf from his coat pocket and draped it over the arm of the couch. Emily walked him to the door. After he left, she saw the scarf. She picked it up slowly, holding it in both hands. A man she had known for less than an hour had somehow brought warmth into a home that had weathered so much. And as she stood in the quiet glow of the apartment, watching the door he had walked through, one quiet thought formed. This man was not meant to pass through. He was meant to stay. It had been a week since Ryan stepped into that little apartment, yet the memory clung to him, the pink cake box, the steam from simple noodles, the soft exhaustion in Emily's eyes. And Sophia, bright and fearless, had left something inside him he could not name. On a gray Tuesday morning, he visited one of Carter Tech's downtown branches, a building under renovation, preparing to reopen. His assistant trailed behind with a clipboard, but Ryan's thoughts were elsewhere. As they entered the main lobby, something in the corner of his eye made him stop. A woman stood on a stool, cleaning the tall glass windows. Her movements were steady, focused. Her blonde hair was tied in the same worn elastic band he remembered. Her posture, familiar. Her presence, unmistakable. Emily. She had not seen him until she turned, catching his reflection in the glass. Her body tensed, their eyes locked for a brief second. She gave a polite nod, her voice composed. "Good morning, sir." Then she turned back to the window, resuming her work as if nothing had happened. Ryan said nothing. He watched her in silence, unreadable emotion flickering in his gaze. Then he walked on. Later that afternoon, when the workers began clearing out, Ryan waited outside the building gate. The winter sun had dipped low behind the skyline, and the air smelled faintly of roasted chestnuts from a nearby cart. Emily exited with a tote bag slung over one shoulder, her steps weary. He stepped toward her. "Emily." She stopped, startled. He gave her a small smile, quiet and real. "I know this is sudden, but would you have coffee with me?" She looked uncertain. "It's not about work," he added quickly. "I never got to thank you for that night, the birthday dinner." A long pause passed between them. Then she nodded. "Okay." They walked a few blocks in silence until they found a tucked-away cafe between office buildings. Warm, yellow light spilled onto the sidewalk. Inside, it was quiet, with just a few patrons lost in their own conversations. They sat by the window. Ryan ordered black coffee. Emily asked for tea with honey. For a while, they said nothing. The silence felt calm, not strained. Then Ryan began. "I grew up in a foster home," he said. "My mom died when I was 5. My dad left soon after. I bounced around different homes, never stayed anywhere long." Emily listened, her eyes softening. "I used to dream about birthdays," he said. "Nothing big, just someone who remembered, someone who said my name. What I saw in your apartment, it wasn't grand, but it felt like something I always wanted." She took a breath. "My husband worked construction," she said. "He fell during a site accident when Sophia was 2. No insurance, no support, just me and her. I cleaned hotel rooms by day and folded sheets at night. Some weeks, we only had enough for one proper meal." She looked down, but I never let her see me cry. I didn't want her to carry my fear. Ryan stared into his coffee, his finger tracing the rim of the cup. "You're stronger than anyone I know," he said softly. They sat in stillness again, letting the truth between them settle. Then Emily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, worn postcard. The corners were frayed, the ink faded. She placed it on the table. "This was from my husband," she said. "The last thing he gave me." Ryan picked it up carefully. On the back, in faded handwriting, were the words, "No matter what happens, you and our daughter will always be the sun in each other's sky." Ryan stared at it for a long time. "I've never had anyone say something like that to me," he said quietly. He looked up. "Would you let me keep it? Just for tonight?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "Just one night." He folded it gently, like it was something breakable. Outside, the city carried on. Cars passing, lights blinking, lives moving fast. But inside that little cafe, 2 people who had once been strangers sat together, and something between them, tentative, quiet, but real, had begun to form. Rain tapped steadily against the windows of the small apartment, turning the city into a blur of gray and silver. Inside, a warm light glowed from the corner lamp, casting soft shadows over the modest room. On the couch, Sophia sat cross-legged, giggling as Ryan used silly voices to read her a fairy tale. Emily stood in the tiny kitchen, stirring a pot of soup, stealing quiet glances toward them. Ryan had been visiting more often. At first, he claimed he just wanted to return the postcard. Then, it was to bring Sophia a new book, or to drop off some cookies he accidentally bought too many of. Each visit stretched longer than the last. Sophia had taken to calling him Funny Mr. Ryan, a name that made him laugh the first time she used it, and blush the second. Now, she insisted he stay for dinner whenever he came by. "Please, Mommy," she would ask. "We need 3 spoons for soup now. 1 for you, 1 for me, and 1 for Funny Mr. Ryan." Emily pretended to scold, but the truth was, she had stopped setting the table for just 2. Something about Ryan's presence made everything feel less heavy. One Wednesday afternoon, the skies opened without warning. Rain poured down in thick, heavy sheets, flooding curbs and soaking shoes. Emily was stuck at work, helping with a late checkout. Her heart sank when she realized she would not make it in time to pick Sophia up from school. But someone else had been paying attention. Ryan left a meeting early, ignoring the confused stares from the boardroom. He arrived at Sophia's school minutes after the final bell rang, scanning the crowd of children until he saw her, standing under the small awning by herself, backpack clutched tight, hair already dripping. "Hey, princess," he called out. Sophia's eyes lit up. "Mr. Ryan." Before she could step into the downpour, he rushed forward, scooped her into his arms, and wrapped his tailored black coat around her small frame. Then, without an umbrella, he ran through the rain with her in his arms, holding her close as the storm drenched him head to toe. From the security booth by the front gate, a guard raised his eyebrows. "Is that Ryan Carter?" he whispered. "The CEO?" By the time they reached the car, both were laughing. Ryan settled her in the back seat, cranking up the heat. "You're all wet," Sophia giggled. "And whose fault is that?" he teased. That night, over hot soup and warm towels, Emily quietly thanked him. He simply nodded, but the way he looked at her lingered longer than it had before. A few days later, Ryan arrived with a carefully wrapped gift. Sophia opened it eagerly, revealing a small handmade journal with a fabric cover and tiny gold stars printed on the front. "It's a wish book," he explained, "for you to write down your dreams, big or small." Sophia hugged it tight. "Thank you, Mr. Ryan." Later that evening, Emily noticed Sophia writing in the book. She peeked over her daughter's shoulder and smiled. At the top of the page, in crooked, hopeful letters, Sophia had written, "I wish Mommy and Mr. Ryan would hold hands at my graduation." Emily felt her breath catch. She looked toward the living room, where Ryan was folding paper animals with Sophia. He glanced up at her and smiled, soft, uncertain, but sincere. And somewhere deep in Emily's heart, something began to shift. The morning headlines glowed on Ryan's office tablet. "Carter Tech to go public. CEO faces intense media scrutiny ahead of IPO." The pressure had been building for weeks. Behind closed boardroom doors, the air was tense. Investors wanted a spotless image. No risks, no distractions. And in their eyes, Ryan's growing attachment to a hotel maid, a single mother, was a threat. "You're not just a man anymore," his mother said. Her voice clipped and cold during one of their meetings. "You're a brand. Do you really think a woman like her, with a child, fits into that?" Ryan stared at her across the polished mahogany table, jaw clenched. "Her name is Emily," he said quietly. "And her daughter is more decent than half the people in this building." But even as he stood his ground, the pressure seeped in like smoke through a crack in the wall. Daily articles, curious eyes, whispers behind doors. Every move he made was now under a magnifying glass. At the same time, Emily noticed a change. One day, without warning, she was called into the hotel manager's office and handed a letter of reassignment. Effective immediately, she was being moved to a branch nearly 2 hours away. No explanation, no appeal. She stared at the paper in disbelief. "Why?" The manager simply shrugged. "It came from corporate." Emily left the office in a daze, her heart pounding. It did not take her long to put the pieces together. She waited for Ryan that evening, hoping for a conversation, for reassurance. But he never showed. He had not replied to her texts in 2 days. In her small apartment, Sophia colored quietly in her wish book, unaware of the storm brewing around her. Emily sat at the kitchen table, the reassignment letter in one hand, the silence in her phone in the other. That night, she made her decision. She waited until Sophia fell asleep, her tiny arms wrapped around a stuffed bear Ryan had given her. Then Emily sat down and wrote a letter, her handwriting trembling, but her heart certain. "Ryan, thank you for everything. Thank you for bringing warmth back into Sophia's world, and for reminding me what it feels like to be seen. You gave my daughter joy, laughter, and a sense of belonging she had never known before. but I can no longer pretend we belong in your world. You are a man standing beneath a spotlight. I am a shadow in the corner of the room. I do not want to be the reason you dim your light. I am a mother, a worker, a woman doing her best. But I am not built for headlines, for scrutiny, for the high walls of the world you live in. I am leaving, not because I doubt your heart, but because I respect it too much to let it be torn apart for me. Sophia and I will be okay. You helped make sure of that. Goodbye, Emily. At dawn, with a single suitcase and a folded paper crane tucked into Sophia's coat pocket, they left. Ryan found the letter on the doormat later that morning, the envelope damp with dew. He stood in silence for a long time, the hallway around him eerily quiet. His fingers tightened around the paper, his throat dry. For the first time in years, he felt utterly alone. The city had not changed, but Ryan had. He moved through his penthouse like a ghost, silence in every corner, cold light spilling through vast windows that looked out over Manhattan's skyline. Once, it had felt like power. Now, it felt like isolation. On his desk sat a small tattered notebook, Sophia's wish book. He opened it for the 100th time, turning each page with the care one would give to something sacred. Crayon drawings danced alongside crooked sentences. Some pages had smudged colors where Sophia had pressed too hard in excitement. Others had been left with only a sentence or two, quiet hopes from a child too young to know disappointment, but old enough to feel absence. I wish Mommy would smile more. I wish Mr. Ryan comes back soon. I wish we could go on a picnic, just me, Mommy, and Mr. Ryan. He closed the book and pressed it to his chest. It had been 3 weeks since Emily left. He had read her letter so many times, it had begun to fray at the edges. He knew every word by heart, yet none of them felt like closure. They felt like a door closing too soon, on something real, something unfinished. At a charity gala that week, the daughter of the board chairman, Rebecca, approached him again. Their parents had been trying to arrange an engagement for months, one that would satisfy public expectations and restore the family image. She smiled flawlessly in her designer gown, crystal earrings sparkling under the lights. "Our families think it's time," she said, placing a manicured hand on his arm. Ryan looked at her, not unkindly, but without warmth. "I'm sorry," he said, stepping back. "I cannot marry someone I do not love." Whispers followed him as he left the ballroom early, the press catching a glimpse of his tense expression as he stepped into the waiting car. Cameras flashed, headlines formed. By Monday morning, he had made his decision. Ryan called an emergency meeting with the board. In a room full of polished suits and sharp stares, he stood at the head of the table and removed the CEO nameplate from in front of him. "I am stepping down," he announced. Confusion erupted. "You're walking away from a billion-dollar IPO?" one board member hissed. "Yes," Ryan said calmly. "Because if success costs me the people who made me feel human again, it's not worth it." He handed over succession papers, offered a transition plan, and left before they could respond. The moment he walked out, the weight began to lift. Back at his apartment, he pulled out the old postcard Emily once showed him, the one from her late husband, with faded handwriting that read, "No matter what happens, you and our daughter will always be the sun in each other's sky." He remembered how Emily had looked when she handed it to him, like someone holding on to the last piece of something broken and sacred. Flipping it over, he noticed the return address in the corner. It was faint, but still legible. A small town in upstate New York. He searched for housing records, local job postings. After 2 phone calls and 1 long silence, he found a lead. A housekeeping job under Emily's name. A school with Sophia's records. A street lined with trees, far from the noise of Manhattan. That same evening, Ryan packed a single overnight bag, slipped the wish book into the front pocket, and left the city behind. The next morning, he arrived in a quiet town where the buildings were old but proud, and the pace of life was gentler. He stepped out of the car, stood under a soft morning sky, and looked up at the small apartment above the florist's shop on the corner. And then, with his heart pounding like it had not in years, he climbed the steps, toward something real, toward something worth everything. The morning sun filtered softly through the kitchen window of the modest upstairs apartment, warming the wooden floor beneath Sophia's bare feet. She twirled in her pajamas, singing to herself as Emily placed a tiny candle into the center of a single pancake. "Happy birthday, my little love," Emily whispered, pressing a kiss to her daughter's forehead. Sophia grinned. "I'm 7 now." Emily smiled, but her eyes held a quiet ache. There were no balloons, no guests, no wrapped presents waiting on the table. Money had been too tight. Still, she was determined to make the day special, with hugs, laughter, and maybe a walk to the park if the sun stayed out. Sophia clapped her hands together. "I made a wish already." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Before you even blew the candle out?" "I did it in my heart," Sophia said proudly. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Emily froze. Sophia turned toward it, curious. "Who's that?" Emily approached slowly, cautiously. When she opened the door, her breath caught. Standing there was Ryan. He held a large wooden box in his hands, carefully polished, with delicate carvings along its edges. Burned into the lid, in elegant script, were the words, "For the most special girl in the world." He looked different, tired, maybe, but peaceful. He had no briefcase, no assistant, no designer coat, just simple clothes and something humble in his eyes. "Hi," he said, his voice quiet. "I hope I'm not too late." Sophia gasped. "Mr. Ryan." She flew into his arms before Emily could say anything, clutching his neck tightly. "I thought you forgot me," she cried into his shoulder. "Never," he murmured, closing his eyes. "Not for a second." He carried her inside, carefully placing the wooden box on the table. Emily stood still, watching the man who had once belonged to a different world, a man who had walked away from it. "I brought a cake," Ryan said softly, lifting the lid to reveal a pink frosted birthday cake nestled beside the gifts. "And a few other things." Sophia opened the box, eyes wide. Inside was a brand new pink dress, frilly, soft, just her size. Underneath, a set of colored pencils in every shade imaginable. And tucked carefully between them was a folded letter, sealed with a golden sticker shaped like a heart. Sophia opened it slowly. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Dear Sophia, I am sorry I disappeared. Grown-ups don't always know how to say what they feel. Sometimes we get scared too. But there is one thing I was never scared of. Loving you and your mom. I left my job. I left the noise. Because nothing in the world felt more real than being your friend. And I don't want to disappear again. If you'll let me, I'd like to stay. Not just for birthdays, but for every little moment in between. Love, Ryan." Sophia held the letter to her chest, her eyes full of light. Emily had not moved. She stood by the sink, arms crossed, but her fingers trembled slightly. Ryan looked at her. "I came back, not for the past we had, but for the future we still could." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. "I do not expect forgiveness," he added, voice low. "But I'm hoping for a second chance. With you, with her, with us." Emily walked over slowly. Her long blonde hair fell freely over her shoulders, the soft kind of messy that came from early mornings and late nights. She looked at Sophia, then at Ryan, and without a word, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around her daughter. Ryan stood still, heart thudding, unsure what it meant, until Emily looked up, her eyes glistening, and nodded. Not with words, not with promises, just a simply quiet nod. And in that silence, something healed. The park was quiet that morning, just the sound of wind brushing through autumn leaves and the soft chatter of birds waking in the trees. Sunlight filtered through golden branches, spilling light across the little wooden gazebo in the center of the field. It was the same park where Sophia used to sit with her sketch pad, legs crossed, drawing rainbows and castles from imagination. Today, it was dressed with white ribbons, wildflowers, and a row of folding chairs filled with a few close friends and strangers turned family. Ryan stood beneath the arch, wearing a simple gray suit. No tie, no fancy accessories. Just peace on his face and a handkerchief clutched tightly in his hand, a gift Sophia had embroidered with her favorite word, hope. Across the lawn, Emily appeared, and every breath caught. She wore a white dress, soft and flowing like morning fog. Her blonde hair was loose, falling over her shoulders in gentle waves. She walked slowly, barefoot in the grass, carrying a bouquet of daisies that Sophia had picked herself. And in front of her, twirling with pride in a pink princess dress, was Sophia. The little girl beamed as she skipped down the aisle. "Here comes the bride," she whispered to each guest with excitement, like she held a secret too big for her chest. Emily met Ryan's eyes, and neither of them looked away. No grand speeches, no choir, just a simple exchange of vows, written in quiet moments over kitchen tables and long walks after bedtime stories. "I do," Ryan said, voice steady but full of emotion. "I do," Emily echoed, her eyes shimmering. Sophia clapped wildly and hugged them both before the minister could even say, "You may kiss the bride." The small crowd laughed, and someone played soft guitar as the new family stood together, under an open sky, in a place where everything had once started, without them even knowing it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, Ryan knelt beside Sophia on a park bench. "You know," he said, "you were the first one to show me what love looks like." Sophia tilted her head. "Me?" "Yes, you," he smiled. "You walked into a bakery with $5 and a heart bigger than this whole city. And somehow you changed everything." She giggled and leaned against him. "Does that mean I get 2 bedtime stories tonight?" Ryan laughed. "Deal." Emily sat nearby, watching them. Her eyes closed for a moment, and for the first time in years, she didn't worry about tomorrow. They were safe. They were whole. In the weeks that followed, Ryan made another quiet vow, this one not spoken in a ceremony, but written into the mission of something new. He launched a non-profit foundation, the Sophia Project. Its mission was simple: support single mothers and their children, providing shelter, education, and a voice for those often unheard. He told the story everywhere he went, not as a CEO, but as a man who had once forgotten what it meant to feel. And every time he did, he ended it the same way. Sometimes, the greatest gift is not how much you have, but whether you're willing to stop, listen to the voice of a child, and let it change your heart forever. And it had. Forever. If this story touched your heart, remind yourself that kindness, no matter how small, can change someone's world. Sophia's $5, Ryan's quiet courage, and Emily's strength remind us what truly matters: love, compassion, and the family we choose. If you believe in the power of stories that heal, inspire, and bring us closer, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales. Join us as we continue to tell real, soul-stirring stories that remind us love always finds a way. See you in the next tale of hope and humanity.